Do you believe in aliens?
Absolutely. I believe that who knows? I believe that there are literally thousands of different alien races coming into and out of our atmosphere all the time. When you study what has happened, especially like after like 1947, the Roswell incident, and then once we split the atom, there was a really high instance of these different craft showing up, and the government obviously has finally acknowledged that there's all these things flying around. The military's photographing them. There was the one, was a Commander Lefevre. That was the one that was filmed like I think 2002. I think it was just released in the past few years, and that guy was on Joe Rogan, went through his experiences, and the government knows that they are there. They even come out in the New York Times, I think it was last year or the year before, and said that the Defense Department, the DoD, United States Department of Defense, has said, oh, by the way, we're in possession of retrieved alien vehicles that were not made on planet Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you ever studied Bob Lazar, and this guy came out, it was like the 80s, I think it was, when his story first came out. And then he's been on Joe Rogan, I think once or twice as well, and shared what he knows. And it sounds like a lot of the stuff that they've been working on for decades, and it's so far advanced they can't figure out how it's made. And one of the things Bob Lazar was talking about at the time, he said it looked like the whole thing was made at once.
Mm-hmm.
And now understanding how modern 3D printing works, he says it seems like these craft are kind of 3D printed in some form or another.
Mm-hmm.
But if you study, there's a book called The Day After Roswell. It's by Philip J. Corso. He was one of the generals that was put in charge of the Roswell, the debris, and basically taking pieces of it and sending it out to the different government defense contractors to try to back engineer it and figure out what they could do with it. And so what he said in his book, which came out in the 90s, was that Kevlar, night vision, different alloys that we have, fiber optics, all of this stuff that we have came from trying to back engineer what was in those craft.
Yeah, and we made a podcast on it the other day where you were showing all the pictures of like that's what it's called, the like blocks.
Oh, Puma Punku.
Yeah.
The big H, like giant H's.
Yeah.
That like the scientists looked at the molecular structure of that, and even though it was rock, it looked like it had been poured into a mold, like the rock had been melted down and poured into like a mold.
Yeah.
That's what it seemed like. We have no idea who built these things because they're thousands and thousands of years old, and the different indigenous tribes around the world, a lot of them say that aliens have always been here. They're in contact. They claim that they've been in contact with them ever since. And in I guess it was after the War of the Worlds broadcast happened with Orson Welles back in the late 30s, where back then, this was before television, so they only had radio. And so they were doing a dramatization of Martians basically invaded Earth and were destroying New York and Washington, D.C. And so people are driving home, after their day at work or whatever, or they're at home at night and they turn on the radio in the middle of the broadcast and they hear this dramatization and explosions going off that aliens have invaded, from Mars, have invaded New York and destroyed Washington, D.C. And the people that tuned into that, they thought it was real. And they were like, holy shit. And so people were throwing stuff in their cars and taking their guns and heading for the mountains, and people freaked out. And so after, I guess when Truman was in office and after the Roswell incident, all these different crafts started showing up. And they were like, so they had the military look into it. It was like, what's going on with all these craft? And so the military studied it and then basically came back and said, we don't know who's piloting these craft, but their technology is so far beyond anything we have that if they wanted to come down here and kick our asses and take over, our military wouldn't even be a speed bump to them.
Yeah.
And so the decision was made back then in I think it was 47, was around that time, was that the government's official position was to just deny that and use misinformation to mislead the public about it, because they believed that society would collapse if they knew that we were not alone in the galaxy, and on top of that, we have all these different craft coming into and out of our atmosphere, and we have no idea where they're from, what their intentions are, who they are, what kind of beings are piloting these craft. So there's, I mean, if you look at the National Press Club, I think it was from 2000, 2001, they had a big meeting, I think it was in Washington, D.C., where they had like 400 or 500 witnesses, and these are people that worked in the military, people that worked in the government, people that actually worked with and studied these different craft and the different programs, and they were all willing to swear under oath. But because it's, I mean, this is now we're talking 70 years ago, that most of the people in Congress, even up through the president, is just doesn't know the extent to what we have or what's been going on, because it becomes so compartmentalized. And even Bob Lazar was talking about that they had, one team would study the propulsion, the other would study the alloys and what the craft was made of, the other ones would study navigation, and so they broke them up into little groups so they can compartmentalize it, and no one group could really understand everything about the craft. They only understood the part that they studied, and so they were able to compartmentalize that stuff and keep it a secret all these decades.
I'm pretty sure we're not the only people here. Like, there's so many intelligence out there that I don't think it should be that shocking to people if things were to come out. I don't think the world would collapse just because we're finally hearing it from the people themselves, I think people are really naive to be like, oh, yeah, there could be aliens. And then when they're actually told, they're going to go berserk.
Well, I think something like 75, 80% of Americans believe that aliens are real. And if you look at the fact that the Department of Defense, this was in the New York Times, like I said, a year and a half ago, saying, oh, yeah, by the way, we're in possession of crashed alien vehicles that were not manufactured on Earth, and basically admitting that it is real, and people are just kind of like, like, yeah, so what? The sky's blue, big deal.
Right.
Nobody cared. It's not all over. It's like, yeah, whatever.
What can we do about it, We're going to run where? Can't leave Earth. So, got to deal with it.
Well, if you study, what's his name, Zacharias Sitchin's work, he translated, I guess, a lot of these Sumerian tablets. And what he said in his work was that humans basically were kind of like, I guess, an experiment or biological experiment or biologically manipulated, and kind of our civilization was helped. I guess we're kind of like an experiment to them, if you will. I wouldn't be surprised, like, aliens used to live here, like you said, and they kind of evolved and mastered the whole, what's it called, like going to different dimensions type and like going to different planets. They're just so intelligent that they can come back here, check on us if we have gained knowledge yet, and they're like, no, they're still kind of stupid. Let's go to the next planet, see if they're evolving. There's probably other planets that are way smarter than us, we're just the dumb ones not figuring things out because some of the
we're worried about gas right now. That's what we're doing.
Well, some of the former government officials that testified and were at the National Press Club, it was like, I think I said it was 2000, 2001. I think it was Dr. Stephen Greer was the one running it. And what they were saying was that they were members of the CIA, and they were like totally convinced that there are different alien races just living amongst they're humanoid, and so they live amongst the population. Their goal is to kind of help humanity evolve to that kind of a oneness state where we're no longer killing and murdering each other, even though when you look around the world, you got the Taliban have now retaken Afghanistan, and they're reimposing the burqa and making women on TV wear the veil, and basically going back to kind of like the Dark Ages, if you will. And you got Russia invading Ukraine and threatening to use nuclear weapons if anybody in the West interferes with them. So we're constantly still killing each other, and if you're an advanced alien civilization where you have a peaceful world where everybody has abundance because of technology and everything, and then we're murdering people over $20 in the streets or drugs or whatever, humans are dangerous. And it's like being around a dangerous animal. It's like, why would you want to interact with the population except in ways that keep you and your people safe? There was
Yeah.
another instance that this was a famous one. It was either late 60s or the early 70s, and it was in the UK, and it was one of our nuclear missile installations. And there was a disc that flew down and kind of like hovered right above some of the silos. And the guys that were operating the missiles watched their switchboard. It's like each missile just kind of went off one by one, just all the power completely turned off.
Mm-hmm.
And they could, and it's like the instruments went completely dead. It was like one at a time, and it sat there for, I don't know, an hour or whatever it was. And they even went out and filmed it, and they're like, "What is this thing doing?" And then at one point, it just took off really fast, out of sight, disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it was about a minute, and it was completely gone in seconds. But about a minute later, each one of the missiles slowly, one by one, turned, the panel lit back up and they turned back on. And the guys that were there that witnessed this, they said that they believed that the aliens were sending a message that we're not going to let you destroy yourselves, and we have the technology to basically render your equipment, your nuclear weapons, totally
Mm-hmm.
inoperable, inert, so you can't use them on each other.
Yeah. It's crazy and scary and interesting. Kind of nice to hear, too, if there's protectors out there not letting us go, like, rot. Because not only are we killing each other, we're killing Earth itself.